Hello and welcome to Mind Shifters Radio. I'm Tim Hayes. I'm your host for the first hour. And today is Friday, March 21st, 2025. As always, we're grateful to everyone who's joining us here today, whether you're listening live or through the archives, as we spend another couple of hours teaching and supporting people in using some of the most powerful, effective, efficient, and accessible tools I've ever encountered. These tools are available absolutely free through the tireless efforts of Dr. Michael and Jeannie Ryce on the website at whyagain.org. If you go to that website and click on the two words that say Start Here in the upper left-hand corner, it'll take you to a page where you can download and read Chapter 24 of Dr. Michael Ryce's book. His book is titled, Why Is This Happening to Me Again? And that chapter of the book contains a narrative description and explanation of the primary tool in this work. That tool is called the Reality Management Worksheet, sometimes called the Reality Management Wake-Up Sheet. And it's a tool I've been using to great effect for over 20 years now to improve the quality of my life and most of my relationships, and to turn any negative emotional experience I have into part of the infallible guidance system that each and every one of us has been given. You can also download the actual worksheet process itself. It's a simple PDF file. Click the link, download it, print it off, copy it as often as you'd like, and use it over and over again absolutely free. You can also download a whole host of audio files of shows just like this one, where people have been stepped through the worksheet process. And if you choose to listen to them even repeatedly, they can serve as a powerful tutorial for you to help you get maximum benefit from these tools in the shortest amount of time possible. You can also go to your app store and type in the three words Heartland Aramaic Forgiveness. And if you choose to do that before you're done typing the word forgiveness, you'll see the glowing heart icon. If you tap on that, it will let you download a completely free and private app that contains the Reality Management Worksheet. It contains an abbreviated version of that worksheet process. It contains a copy of the Dragon Klingon game, which is a wonderful way to introduce these tools to even younger audiences. We hope people do all of that soon and often, primarily because it tends to improve the quality of people's lives the more they actively apply these tools in their lives. And secondarily, because it tends to prompt comments, questions, answers, and testimonials. And if you have any of those to share with us, we'd greatly appreciate you doing so. You can email me at tjh@mindshifters-academy.org. Or you can email Jeannie at jeanie@whyagain.org. That's whyagain.org. And if we get a question or a comment from you, we'll address it on the internet show. And then as time allows, send you a notification about what day and time that occurred, so you can listen back to the archives for your feedback or input. If you're listening to us on live.needle.com/mindshiftersradio, we're grateful that you're here and sharing time with us. However, if you'd like to have direct input, you need to download the Needle app. The Needle app's available through your app store. It's NEDL. And it shows up as an AI tuner for live radio. When you download that app, open it up, log in, answer some questions, and you'll be able to either type in a comment in the app or tap the phone icon and talk to us directly. And we're grateful whenever anybody does that, reaches out to us either through email or comment, because it makes it infinitely easier for us to live into our intention with this work. The intention we have with this work is to be of service. And if you let us know how these things are landing for you, we greatly appreciate it. It makes it so much easier for us to live into that intention. So, where we left off yesterday was we're reading from the book A Walk in the Physical by Christian Sundberg. And I'm trying to find where I was. We had left off right where it starts to talk about his post-birth experience. And his pre-birth experience, he had once again hit a wall of fear and decided against incarnating in the physical. And he had what he can only describe as all that is, the great I am, God, whatever you want to call it, a consciousness that was all-consuming, come to him and share with him the fact that his fear was unfounded, that he was perfectly safe, even though he's going into this life experience where he will forget most of that, and he's going into it to have these challenges so that he can grow in his capacity to experience different things of greater and greater intensity and still remain loving. So now he talks about his post-birth experience, and he writes, "My next memory is of the day I was born. I remember the shock of physical birth. It felt like an overload of sensory data, light, sound, cold, touching, someone cutting my body, as in circumcision, etc. I had no idea what was happening, no concept of what this intense experience was about. Yet I was extremely curious. I could tell there were beings, as in the nurses, quote, taking care, close quotes, of me. And I felt love and awe for them, even though I had no idea who they were. The experience was one of shock and wonder, but there was no intellectual context or understanding yet at all. I also remember one visual image of the layout of the room. He's calling it the birth room. I lost my place here for a minute, so I have to figure out why this is glitching in the Kindle. So he writes, I also remember one visual image of the layout of the birth room after I was pulled out. My mother later confirmed that layout to me when I drew it for her much later in life. When I was a young child, I remembered my pre-birth experience, at least in parts. I was born in Pennsylvania, USA in 1980, but I naturally sensed that I wasn't really just from Earth. I knew that none of us were, that we were just visiting. No one else talked about it, so I didn't either. It seemed right to focus on the physical and to relegate those memories to some distant corner most of the time. However, deep down I knew, and I assumed everyone else did. One day when I was very young, young enough that I was still walking around in a diaper, a neighbor was over visiting our house. I asked her if she wanted to watch me dance to a song that I really liked, and she agreed. Now, in other reality systems, it is normal for beings to be able to feel each other's emotions, so I assumed that that would be the case here too. Really enjoying the music, I danced for her. I was feeling very funky. In the middle of my funky dance, she walked away unimpressed. And then it hit me. She can't feel what I'm feeling. Where the heck was I that people couldn't feel each other's feelings? And suddenly, this entire world seemed very alien indeed. In the first 5 or so years of my life, I would occasionally draw upon the flowchart memory from the pre-birth experience to look ahead and gain information about what to expect. Eventually, that began to close off to me. Physical reality seemed to become increasingly firm. And by the age of 6 or 7, I had completely forgotten my pre-birth memory. I was human-focused, as it seemed I should be. I adopted the beliefs that were handed to me by the dear ones who now physically cared for me. I was raised in the Lutheran faith, and for a while I saw the world through that lens. I grew up in a wonderfully loving family, but was constantly beset by physical challenges, including the numerous symptoms of untreated celiac disease. This is an autoimmune response to gluten. I also had persistent migraine headaches and a number of other chronic ailments. Despite growing up with constant fatigue, and despite commonly being the target of bullying in school, I was what you'd call successful by human standards. I earned straight A's all through my schooling, and after high school I attended college for Chinese International Business Management. After studying abroad in Beijing in my sophomore year of college, I attempted to move to China after graduation at the age of 22. Little did I know it then, but the trauma I had anticipated before I incarnated was about to happen. Emotionally distraught from the outcome of my parents' divorce, and at the end of an important 5-year romantic relationship, and physically sick from untreated chronic celiac disease, I suffered a heat stroke in the humid 110 degrees Fahrenheit heat of Chengdu, China, while teaching English. I spent 4 days in a Chinese hospital and about a week in my hotel room. Somehow the heat stroke or the 4 days of straight potassium administered by the hospital triggered some kind of terribly painful neurological damage that lasted for months. I felt like every nerve in my body was being burned, and I could not escape an unrelenting and unbearable amount of pain. I experienced physical agony that felt like it would never end. The anxiety and terror I experienced during that time was also completely overwhelming. I suffered post-traumatic stress disorder as a result of this experience, and afterwards spent years in counseling, facing the deep negative self-perceptions that I had bought into during that time. A few years later, I also became bedridden from the celiac disease until it was finally diagnosed. In that same year, I also suffered a spontaneous pneumothorax. This is a lung collapse due to internal bleeding. And I spent 10 days in the hospital, 8 of those with a tube in my chest. These experiences were significant personal challenges for me. But they were challenges that were, in fact, extremely valuable. All these illnesses mightily prompted one great response in me. This was the experience of that ancient, deep fear. That was this very specific fear that I had come to this reality to face, and it was being pulled up into my experience time and again, day after day. For years, I resisted it. I resisted it persistently until after incredible amounts of suffering, I seemed to have no choice left but to go into the pain. I spent 5 years going through EMDR, this is the eye movement desensitization and reprocessing therapy, and through that and other techniques, I faced my demons. I did this one negative self-perception at a time. I became increasingly brave about actually feeling whatever I felt. I became a warrior of feeling. I faced the darkness, I felt the pain, and through hundreds and hundreds of encounters with the reality of exactly the present moment that I had built up for myself, I healed. I healed far more than I ever could have previously imagined. And even more importantly, I found the enduring light of being beneath the cacophony of my thinking human mind. That light of being was and is far more real and enduring than the fears and pains that I thought were so real. It wasn't until I was 30 years old that I began to remember how all of this fit with my pre-birth plan. It started when I discovered the impactful work of physicist and consciousness explorer Tom Campbell. I had always been a spiritual seeker, and I was initially drawn to Tom's work primarily because his reality model spoke at great length about fear and the place of fear in the emotional spiritual walk. That message really resonated with me. After only a few months of beginning a consistent meditation practice, as I became increasingly familiar with the nature of my awareness itself, the memories began to unexpectedly but naturally return to me. Those memories were so real, so vivid, so present now that they were dissimilar from earthly memories, and so very personal. I not only had memories spontaneously return, I also began to have non-physical experiences, including out-of-body experiences. These experiences were extremely eye-opening for me. Bit by bit, over the next decade, I became increasingly, tangibly aware of our very real, greater spiritual nature. The veil remains over me somewhat, ebbing and flowing as my focus changes. My pre-birth experience is in mind almost every day, at certain times feeling extremely close, and at other times distant. But I always feel that I remain at least somewhat aware of the greater context in which this earthly experience is arising. So I'm taking a breath. I'm checking the app for comments or people with a hand raised. We're just about 20 minutes into this session today. We have the app. According to the app, we've got 6 people listening, so thank you all for being here. And this is a prime opportunity as I take a break for a breath and a sip of water for you to ask a question, make a comment. In lieu of anybody typing a comment or raising a hand, I will continue reading. I believe Susan just asked, despite the fact that the app isn't telling me there's a comment here, there's a comment here. How am I feeling in the teeth department? I'm doing good self-care, and I'm going through the process. They estimate that the greatest discomfort is going to come 4 and 5 days after the surgery. So I'm doing well enough. To get back to the reading, the next segment is titled A Few Brief Examples of Non-Physical Experiences. Christian writes, I am naturally skeptical, so I've also worked at validating my non-physical experiences as much as possible. For instance, there have been 4 times so far that I've been able to meet another person whom I know physically and meet them in the non-physical environment while our bodies were asleep. And then I've been able to successfully confirm the interaction with them the next day, or at least confirm it to my own satisfaction. There have been at least as many failures in that department as well. I am yet a neophyte in the non-physical exploration, but the experiences I have had have been extremely impactful. Indeed, those experiences are even more real and clear than lucid earthly experiences. In general, I tend to be careful about sharing the details of those experiences because, while they may seem very entertaining, the entertainment aspect can make them distracting for the ego. Even so, I will share just 3 brief specific examples so that the reader may have additional points of reference regarding the types of experiences that have been personally impactful for me. Once, I was in a non-physical environment that appeared in extreme detail to be the campus of Marietta College, where I had gone to school. My father was there. I knew it was actually him, not just a dream or image or something. Not only because of the nature of the environment and my own clear lucidity, but because of everything I could sense about him and his deeper nature. He was there with 3 of his dear non-physical friends. And the word friends is in quotes. These friends had waited for him while he met with me. I sensed their shared nature, their deep and ancient friendship, and how long he had known them. My father and I were conversing with great joy when I conveyed to him that I wanted to confirm the meeting was real when our bodies awoke. I firmly repeated to him, "You really have to remember. Focus on remembering. I'm going to call you in the morning, and I want you to tell me where we are standing right now on my college campus." And I told him, remember, and he said, okay, I will. Still, I persisted, no, you won't, not unless you really, really focus on remembering. I was very adamant that he remember. The next morning, I called my father early in the morning. Despite having never tried anything like this with him before, I simply said, "So, did you have any dreams last night?" And he quickly interrupted, saying, "Wait, I had a really strange dream that felt real and alien. I don't remember anything about it, but I just woke up thinking that I was definitely supposed to remember something. I just don't remember what that something was." Christian writes, "That was good enough for me." Another time, while my body was asleep, I came across the soul of my wife's ex-boyfriend. Now, until this experience in the physical world, this person and I had not been fans of each other. However, in this experience, I saw his true nature. I saw who he really was, the living, unspeakably amazing soul who was, quote, playing, close quotes, his human character. It was so beautiful, so full of marvel and wonder, that I could not possibly express it here in words. His being was like an ocean, or perhaps a universe of colors, energies, and vibrations. I sensed deeply that he and I actually shared an important part of our nature, an ancient honor, he has in quotes, ancient honor, close quotes, that was dear to both of us. I also sensed how his nature overlapped with that of my wife's, in that they both were intrepid explorers of creativity. I sensed in a profound way what he was doing in his current life, how utterly, quote, squashed, close quotes, he felt from lack of love here, how he was like clay that had been smushed incredibly thin by a car tire, and yet he was still attempting to manifest creatively from that place. I was overwhelmed by respect and love for him. Being certain of what I experienced, I physically called him the next day. Knowing now who he was, I risked saying directly, quote, I saw your soul last night, close quotes. And I continued to expound on what I had experienced at length. When I finished, he said, quote, well, I have to say, if I was going to describe who I really am to somebody, that sounds pretty close to what I'd say, close quotes. To this day, when I come across this man, I feel compelled to kneel to him out of respect. As a third example, one time after meditating, I suddenly saw hundreds of spheres of existence, which I knew were lifetimes that I had experienced. I could see clearly that these other experiences were not those of what you might call, quote, other people, close quotes. They were me. That is, the me that feels like me to me was those other people. The same me had those experiences. It was me just doing and being other things than other people. I remember only snippets from some of them, but as an example, I remember being a woman who had given birth. As this woman, I then subsequently had the same fear I'm now facing in this life. For me, as her, the fear was a response to having experienced the pain of giving birth and then being pregnant a second time and anticipating that pain again. These experiences may seem interesting, but this book is about your experience, not mine. I share these experiences just to give you a little better sense of the path I am on, so that as you venture deeper into the book, you may feel that we're on this journey together. The next section is titled, Writing This Book. Christian writes, I'm certainly no special person to be writing a book on spirituality. I have no special authority at all. Let my words speak for themselves. I'm simply another deeply imperfect seeker, a single fellow spark of the great divine flame who is engaging in this extreme human experience, just like you. I have much fear and ego. I still suffer at times, and I have so very much to learn. And yet, I have come to know that there is no separate I in all of this. As strange as it may sound, there is no separate person named Christian. There is only, quote, my, close quotes, awareness, the awareness that is having an amazing local human experience. I know in a tangible way now that my awareness actually transcends the human condition, and indeed this entire physical universe. I'm overjoyed to proclaim that capital L, capital O, capital V, capital E, love, is the underlying power of all existence. That there is nothing ever to truly fear. Love is the bedrock, the ultimate power, the undying foundation upon which all of this is built. Your life is built on it too, and you are an incredibly important part of the great plan of love that is unfolding on earth. I wish to remind you of that while you are here. I felt it is important to write this book at this time because the collective consciousness of humanity is currently going through a great shift. I give thanks to our many friends in spirit who have guided me and helped me to bring this message into physical reality in this way at this time. I'm writing this book as I feel called to share awareness of our greater nature and to spread the message of fearlessness and love that is inherent to what we all really are. We are not our human story. We transcend the human story. And yet, the human story is so very meaningful. I'm not just the young man who collapsed in China from heat stroke. I am not just this body with its unique challenges. I can say with certainty that you too are far more than the confines of your story. We relate to each other by our human stories, but my intention with this book is to engage with you in a far deeper way. I came to this side of the veil in part to write this book. I want to reach out to you, the real you. I seek to stir the parts of you that transcend your own story, your own history, your own pain and circumstances, the parts of you that transcend your history, your story, and your pain and your circumstances. I want to remind you of the unspeakably vast love that exists for you specifically. And I want to encourage you as you are on your meaningful human journey so that you can seek to use this experience to its fullest while you are here. So it calls to me to slow down here and say that even this morning as I was prepping for my morning ritual and meditations and getting some nourishment in me, etc., I kept going back to what I'd said yesterday, where he had written that this life we are living is like the most precious gift anywhere ever. The gift of being able to have this physical experience. Just to slow down a little bit and understand, like Andrea Gibson writes in her piece, for the days when I stop wanting a body. What if my soul misses the body as soon as it's gone? Every aspect of it, every ache and pain, every fear, every joy, every hug, every scraped knee, as she writes about in that spoken word piece, every bang of the funny bone on my elbow. What if my soul will miss everything about being human? Despite the fact that as a human, I say, boy, I won't miss it when this is gone. Because from this perspective, this very limited, dreamlike perspective, I've been trained to think this is good, this is bad, this is right, this is wrong, rather than to think in terms of everything that arises is arising for me. Everything that happens is happening for me to have this level of experience, rather than what we're taught in most of our life experiences by friends and families and teachers, even psychologists, etc., that things are happening to me. What would happen if I could more consistently shift to the experience of everything about this life as being a blessing and an opportunity for me to have an experience that I can't have any other way? So this is what I think we're being called to slow down and at least begin to explore. You are having a human journey, and Christian in this book is inviting you to explore the meaningful nature of this human journey as though it's just a tiny little fraction of your existence, and that you are so much more as consciousness, connected to all consciousness. So, hopefully playing with that a little bit from your own experience will open some opportunities for you to choose differently as you choose to interpret and then respond to your life as it's unfolding. The next little section here, Christian writes, a special thanks. He says, I would like to sincerely give special thanks to the physicist and consciousness explorer Tom Campbell, without whom this book would not have been written, and without whose work a great deal of fear would not have been processed. Also, I'm thankful to borrow a few of Tom's terms in this book, as I find them most appropriate for what I was attempting to express. thank you. He calls him, quote, Uncle Tom, close quotes. And it is the experience of things like that. So for Christian, he found Tom Campbell's books and his works. There are 3 of them that I have since dug into. My Big Toe, My Big Theory of Everything by Thomas Campbell. And they're just right in line with this whole idea that our consciousness is not the product of random neural firings, the way Eben Alexander, the neurosurgeon, would have believed until he'd had his own out-of-body experience. When we're introduced to different perspectives, different ways to think about our lives and ourselves, when we're introduced to different tools that we can use to help us let's say, experience them differently. When we're willing to apply those tools, when we're willing to try on a different interpretation and break free of our habitual response, Dr. Michael Ryce calls it the automatic response part of the brain. When we're willing to step into what Michael Ryce would call spiritual faculties, breathe and soften and ask to be shown, learn discernment, learn true creativity, learn compassion, learn to experience ourselves as this energy of creation expressing in form. There are a number of ways that I've done that. So Christian Sundberg is talking about how when he started doing these meditations, his own meditation, which is what Tom Campbell recommends to people. People come to Tom Campbell and say, hey, teach me spiritually. And Tom Campbell says, no, do your own meditation and ask to be taught by forces that are far more wise and connected than I am as a human being, as an intellect or an ego. So that's what Christian did. He started his own deep meditative practice, and that's how he awakened to the memory of what he knew from his pre-life experience and what he knew in his early years of life in the physical, or pre-physical experience, and then his first few years in the physical realm, where he still remembered his pre-physical existence and planning and emotions and hopes and intentions. And what I've done over the years, just because it's come to me to do this, is to, when I get exposed to a new tool or a new perspective, is to actively apply it in my life and just watch how things unfold and to see, does it make any significant difference? And I'm here to tell you that, yeah, it's really amazingly useful to apply tools. One of them, the day before yesterday, was the EFT tapping. Yet again, I've had a number of experiences in my life since I've learned about the neuroemotional technique and the EFT tapping, where my physical body has gone through significant disruption, discomfort, pain, etc. And for many of them, I have remembered to use the EFT tapping in various forms and the calming breath. And the stark difference between those times when I remember to use it, have remembered to use a tool like that, stand in stark contrast to the times before that in my life where I would go through physical pain and injuries and without it. And the rate of healing that I experience is far more rapid and thorough. The level of mental emotional upset that I experience is minimal when I'm using the tools compared to when I'm not. And somebody was asking me about this oral surgery that happened the day before yesterday, just an hour or so after the internet show on Wednesday. And my response was, well, it's kind of like a Twilight Zone episode. I'm dressed the way I would be for my normal day of seeing patients at work, and I drive 20 minutes to the oral surgeon. I walk in, and the waiting room is empty, and I sit and wait for 20 minutes. I'd done some, 10 or 15 minutes of meditation and heart math meditation before going over there. And then I sat there and just counted my breaths while I was in the waiting room. And they call me in and sit me down in what looks like a dentist chair. And the next thing you know, they're hard at work extracting 2 teeth out of my jaw and drilling holes in it and implanting metal. And through the whole thing, I just sat there counting my breaths and rubbing my ends of my fingertips in this shortcut that I teach people for the EFT tapping work. And I just kept reminding myself that even though this seems bizarre and ridiculous and, otherworldly, I'm going to be okay. And lots of other people go through this. And then I would just return to the counting and rubbing the fingers. And I'm just here to tell you that my experience of going through severely physically disruptive things that would be, what people might call excruciating pain, etc., when I use the tools is light years away from when I don't. And I've had both. I've had situations where I've had, bones broken in half and all kinds of other physical disruptions long before I knew these tools. And so I have vivid memories of the fear and the disruption, and I know the comparison. I know how much better it is to be focused on gentle breathing and counting and to be using the EFT fingertip points or the face and body points, and to just keep repeating the thought pattern that says, even though this thing is happening, whatever it is, I'm going to pretend it can get better even though I have no idea how. So I'm literally putting the conscious logical mind aside for now and just gently focusing on the use of tools that allows an easier experience, an ease, a comfort. I don't know how else to say it. So this is the invitation from Christian that you get reminded through this book that who you are is consciousness. You are not just your story about what's happened to you. You are not just your physical body. You, the way you are as consciousness, you are simply having a meaningful human journey. And he's here to encourage you to use this experience in the physical realm to its fullest benefit while you're here. And one of them is the overcoming of the belief of fear being valid. It reminds me of in the Way of Mastery in the third lesson where Yeshua says, listen, it doesn't mean you're not going to have anger come up, but stop fooling yourself into thinking that it's valid or that it serves any useful purpose other than an alarm system to let you know that your thinking is off the mark. So we have some time. It's about 9 minutes to the end of the hour. We have time for a comment or a question or somebody putting a hand up in the app. And without anything happening there, I will return to the reading. Christian writes, here's a section titled What This Book Is. This book is written with the intention of providing an encouraging mental framework for the spiritual seeker, so as to aid the reader in expanding his or her own personal understanding of the larger picture. He writes, I do not possess any special knowledge. I only seek to remind you of the truths that already reside deep within you. Your deeper being, beneath all the stories of your life, already knows this. I wish to speak to that part of you as well. In fact, despite the intellectual nature of many of the ideas presented in this book, the content requires the reader to consider not just with the thinking mind, but with his or her deeper being. Every person is beautifully unique, and thus every individual's spiritual walk will also be beautifully unique. No one can hand capital T truth to you, not me or anyone else. And yet, what I personally know, I wish to support your unique personal journey and your awareness of our very real greater nature. And I hope to do this by providing ideas and suggesting a structure for the human mind to approach aspects of reality which transcend the earthly context, especially those aspects that are often misunderstood by mankind at this time. I do this with the intention that you may then utilize whatever aligns with your own experience and whatever appeals to your reason, and then just disregard the rest. This reminds me of discussions we've had over the years here on the internet show, and the concept of wisdom. And it came to me very clearly in some of these discussions back and forth that wisdom cannot be possessed. People can't speak wisdom to you. Wisdom doesn't get written down and stay there unchanging. Wisdom is this in the present moment knowing, deep felt sense knowing of how best to respond to the flow of life energy, to be a part of it in the way that brings a blessing to the flow. And so it came to me to say, wisdom can't be possessed. It can only be accessed. And I think that's what Christian is talking about here, that each one of us can learn to turn inside to our core, to our connection, to our deeper self, our consciousness, to our connection to the one consciousness mind, the one mind, whatever you want to say, God, light, love, Holy Spirit, that each of us has that capacity to tap the wisdom that's always there. And as Guy Finley says, your Creator puts you in a place where your connection, your instant, constant connection to the forces that can teach you, will never abandon you if you just ask to be taught. So we're down to the last 4 minutes or so. Checking the comments, and Celinda asks, did you find Thomas Campbell's work to be a difficult read? All I can say about that is that 20 years ago, maybe even 10 years ago, it would have been a difficult read. I can imagine it would have been a difficult read. When I started listening to the audible version of his 3 books just a couple of years ago, it just all felt like coming home. And there are parts of it that intellectually make jumps and leaps that don't feel really solid to me, but none of it made me feel like, oh, that's wrong, or oh, I'm not going there. So I hope that answers your question, Celinda. Thank you for the question. It is not, in my opinion, it's not for the beginning spiritual seeker. It's for people who have done their own meditation and read different books and different spiritual teachers and questioned things for themselves for years and tried different things as life is unfolding and learned what works best for them. And then here is, like graduate school spiritual seeking. That's how I would categorize that. So we're down to our last few minutes. I appreciate your all being here. This is a Friday, so we will not have a show until Monday. And I will just thank you all for being here and remind us all that we come from love. We're made of this stuff we call love. We actually are love, the energy of creation expressing in form. Everything else is false. And I offer you blessings and have a wonderful weekend.